When we think of the risk of concussions in athletes, sports like football and hockey often come to mind, but researchers have also been focusing on a different sport. How about this? Soccer. Mild but repetitive hits to the head, not necessarily concussions, can be risk for the brain injury known as CTE. Our chief medical correspondent, that's Dr. Jon LaPook, has been looking into the growing concerns about CTE in soccer, a game played by an estimated 13 million American children, including Vlad's nephew, we just learned. First on CBS Mornings, Jon interviewed retired U.S. soccer star Bruce Murray about his growing fears for his health. Jon, good morning. Most people don't think about soccer in this case.
No, that's true. Good morning, Gayle. CTE is a stealth disease. There's no cure, and it can only be diagnosed after death. Symptoms include trouble with memory, problems organizing and planning simple activities, and changes in behavior, such as lack of motivation or having a short temper. Today, we're showing you the uncertainty for a former elite player who's now experiencing changes in his memory.
Swinging over the cross, and a superb volley!
In 1990,
Bruce Murray, the scorer.
Bruce Murray was at the top of his game.
Murray with a header, yes!
Murray was a star at Clemson.
It was time for the Bruce Murray Show again.
Before playing forward for Team USA.
It's the greatest feeling to be able to travel the world and do what we did.
Murray, nice run by Bruce, but it's
As he moved into professional soccer, Murray continued his reputation for being fearless. His aggressive play sometimes left him seeing stars.
how did those concussions generally happen?
I was playing for the U.S. in Saudi Arabia, and one of the Saudi players came right through, and his knee caught me in the head. I was on my hands and knees trying to find where my equilibrium was. But for the next 6 weeks to a month, I would go places and not know why I was there.
Back then, they would just say, you got your bell rung.
Yeah.
Right? You heard that expression?
Oh, yeah. Get back out there, be tough.
Murray stayed tough through multiple concussions and collisions. He retired in 1995 at age 29.
What made you finally hang up your sneakers?
I was suffering from post-concussion, lack of sleep, and I have a hard time with light headaches. My body just felt like beaten up. Where do you want to go for 4 years, right?
When we visited Murray and his family in Maryland 2 years ago, he was troubled by recent lapses in memory,
So how's your airplane coming there, buddy?
including one that left him especially shaken.
My wife and my son and I were at the store, and I was in the car, and they came out, and they came to the car, and I said, oh, sorry, ma'am, do you need to get by? And then she kind of like looked at me like, are you okay? And then I was like, oh, wait a second, that's you.
That you was the woman he had married 8 years earlier, Lynn Murray.
When Bruce looked at you and didn't recognize you, what was that like for you?
It was shocking. It told me a lot. You know, I'm realizing now that we don't have the future that we were hoping for. So.
It's the uncertainty.
Yeah.
Good job, Callie.
Because of Bruce's history of concussions, the Murrays reached out to Boston University's Center for Chronic Traumatic Encephalopathy, or CTE.
The issue is the repetitive hits that the players take. And
Dr. Ann McKee is the center's director and believes concussions are not the only cause of CTE.
I think there's been such an emphasis on concussion in these contact sports. It's the hits that are asymptomatic that the player plays right through, and over time, those injuries accumulate and lead to a high risk for CTE.
Murray recalls heading the ball up to 20 times a day during practice drills.
But the balls were coming in at full pace, and you're just trying to get a piece of it and get it in the net.
With your head?
Oh, yeah. And there are many times you would stagger back to the line, and your teammate would be like, man, that looked terrible. You okay? You're like, nah, yeah, I'm fine.
Back then, nobody was saying, hey, maybe this is a problem.
Nobody said that, yeah.
Since CTE can only be diagnosed after death, the BU researchers scanned Murray's head for clues, and they found one. His brain tissue, seen here in gray, had atrophied or shrunk. Compare that with this normal scan, where the gray brain tissue fills much of the skull.
Do you think that heading should be allowed in soccer?
There's an argument for taking heading out of soccer. Those balls are coming from a great distance at a tremendous velocity, and that impacts the head and leads to these injuries later on.
U.S. Soccer, which governs the sport from kindergarten through the elite level, has extensive concussion protocols, and it bans or limits headers in children 13 and younger. But when it comes to subconcussive hits in older players, U.S. Soccer told CBS News it is awaiting more research. The organization declined our request for an on-camera interview.
Think about some of the military cases.
Dr. McKee has examined the brains of hundreds of deceased veterans and athletes, including football player Aaron Hernandez, who died by suicide while serving a life sentence for murder. She thinks more needs to be done to protect athletes of all ages.
Is the damage that you see in football similar to the damage you've been seeing with soccer?
Yeah, the changes look identical whether they played rugby, ice hockey, football, or soccer. It's the same repetitive hits to the head.
We meet again.
When we checked with Bruce and Lynn Murray recently, they told us his condition appears to be stable, but he still struggles with memory, focus, and balance.
Good, go with pace, with pace. Excellent, excellent. Good work, good work.
He still enjoys coaching youth soccer,
Good, come find me. Come on, come find me. There you go.
but believes the sport he loves may need changes to make it safer for everyone.
I think U.S. soccer needs to address this. It's called football all around the world.
Good.
What if you rewrite the rules? Do you have to head the ball?
You know, other former players are also concerned about possible long-term effects of head trauma. 3 years ago, we interviewed Michelle Akers and her former teammate and soccer standout, Brandi Chastain. Both women have pledged to donate their brains to science when they die and to spread awareness of CTE while they are living.
I've had more than a handful of concussions, so I know what it's like. And for the viewer at home, you may wonder what it is like. Just imagine sitting in your house at night, you have a power outage. That's your mind.
It goes dark.
Just like that.
In an instant.
Body goes limp, you don't know what's going on, and then you come to, and the last thing you remember could be 30 seconds, it could be a minute.
Right.
It really varies depending on how severe the concussion was, but this is an issue that these kids are dealing with. And then they become high school, collegiate, and professional athletes, which is compounding these concussions year after year.
Yeah, and of course, the big problem, and Dr. McKee pointed that out, is there's no way of diagnosing it right now except after death, looking at the brain. So they're looking at ways of diagnosing it before death, so with scans, with blood tests, with spinal fluid analysis. And if you can do that, then maybe you can start following kids. Who's at risk? And if they're at risk, is there a way of preventing these injuries and maybe even do a trial to see what can we do to intervene to stop it. But this whole issue of the subconcussive hits needs much more exploration.
Yeah. Well, the picture you showed was kind of jarring. It showed of his brain. Thank you, Jon. Tomorrow on CBS Mornings, Jon's coming back. He'll have part 2 of this investigation. The family of former MLS player Scott Vermillion talks to him about the clues to CTE that they learned about after his death at age 44. We'll be right back.